the opportunities that those present to maximize your investments. And that's why all of you are here. And if you're watching online, I'm sure that's why you're watching. And land is so precious, you already have it. And so to develop that further is just being a good steward of it. So really, really excited that we can give you ideas that'll help you make more money. And then also really excited that we can also solve part of the housing crisis. And so this is always one of my favorite, it's just one of my favorite topics for sure. And if you're not an AOA member, AOA membership fee is just $97. You get full access to all of our forums for that price. You get full access to our all of our advisors there, and they'll give you property management advice. None of us are attorneys, but we do have attorneys review our forms, and we get a lot of input from multiple sources, and so that really helps keep our forms up to date. And really the goal that we understand that what you don't know could cost you a fortune. And so really the whole goal is that we would give you the information you need to avoid the pitfalls, and then also get those great opportunities and not miss anything. And there's a lot going on. If you want to hear more about Prop 33, we will have a live stream Wednesday at 10 a.m. and that will be with Edrin Shamtab, one of the attorneys at SNS. And then on Halloween, we're going to have another live stream with Dennis Block, and we'll be going over those tricky tenant things that they do to elongate the eviction process. And so that's obviously how many of you have really had one of those evictions where it just took way too long? Raise your hand. So and what you know now, we need to teach people, we need to teach them that so that they can avoid the headache and the cost of all the delays and all the fees. So that'll come up on Halloween. So that's Thursday at 10 a.m. And then next month, we'll have a major tenant screening update. We covered it online a little bit. We'll do that in Hawthorne. And so that's in person. You can join for that one. And then San Diego, if you want to just have a business expense, go down to San Diego. We're going to be at the Marina Village, which is just a wonderful location. It's on the wharf. They have this dock house cafe, and just amazing portions, really good food, and it's cheap. So free parking there for anyone who wants to join there. We'll also be covering tenant screening, and then we'll have attorney Franco Simone that will share about San Diego tenant protections and the ordinance that's local there versus and just how that compares and how that relates to California state tenant protection and rent control. So those are a few things that are going on, and we want to thank ADU Gold and Fort Homes for sponsoring this event. We're here at the live and also online, so this is kind of fun to be here at the Santa Monica Playhouse. This is for those of you that are watching, you can't see the audience, but it's just a little box, and it goes straight up and just Peter style. So this is a lot of fun. People have enjoyed some little treats out there before we got started too. So this is great, but it's ADU Gold and Fort Homes. And ADU Gold, they do a strategy session with you. They'll do the designing, planning, and permitting phase. And Fort Homes does a lot of construction, and I think they'll share a lot more. There's a whole lot that they do, and so many ways that they can serve you. And today we have two speakers with us. Taylor Francis is the first that I'm going to introduce. He's the founder of Fort Homes, and he graduated with a JD from USC Law School in 2019. Sharp guy. He previously worked as an engineer for a major window manufacturer. So he's you're going to meet him today, and here we go. So we're going to get the show rolling now, finally. And so I'd like to introduce to you now Mr. ADU, Seth Phillips. So come on up. He's the founder of ADU Gold. He's been involved with over 1,300 home renovations. And he has 23 years of.
Let's do it. Are you ready? Let's go. Thank you. Where it begins, I can't begin to know it, but then I know it's growing strong. Was it the spring? Then spring became the summer. Who would believe you'd come along? Okay, here we go. Hands, touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you. Big line, here we go. Sweet you, boom, boom, boom. Good times never seem so good. So good, so good, so good. I've been inclined to believe there never was, but now I'm sweet you. Not your usual business meeting, is it? Well, I'd like to bring some, joy and fun and happiness into everything I do in life. And it's a little more challenging when you're talking about building something, not a very kind of joyous subject in general. But I'm so excited to be here with you tonight to talk about some of the amazing new opportunities that have come along. And it's been a long road. And just a real quick background on me. I'm originally from Minnesota, you betcha, and you'll still hear a little bit of that in my voice. But I've lived in the Los Angeles area for over 38 years, and I've been a licensed real estate broker and agent for 35 years. So I've got a big real estate background, and I loved being in that business. And then everything was going along great, and then all of a sudden in 2006, 2007, something happened. The market crashed. And I went from having this great job that I loved, that I was making great money at, to basically being unemployed overnight, it seemed like. It happened so fast. So I was looking around for other things to do until the market hopefully began to heal. And so with a business partner, I went into the house flipping business. And these numbers sound crazy, and it really wasn't that long ago. We were buying properties at the courthouse steps in Los Angeles for $120,000, fixing them up and selling them for $180,000. Well, anybody that's been in the flipping business knows between the cost of the fixing up and the buying cost and the selling cost and the financing cost, that doesn't leave much meat on that bone. So although we did that, but we realized the only way we could really make any money at it was to really move up in volume. So we had to learn some more things to do that, which we did. And then we were typically doing about 12 projects at the same time. And that was successful. And then as the market did finally start to heal a little bit, we just started to move further and further up that food chain until we were doing just ground up new construction in the ultra luxury market in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and Hollywood Hills. Those homes were not selling for $180,000. Those homes were selling for $10 million. So it was a big difference. But taking that jump up into that kind of construction also was a whole new learning curve, because those projects are very, very complex and they take a long time. And there's, one thing that we know is that in real estate, it moves in cycles. Sometimes it's moving up, but sometimes it's moving down. Very fortunately, in our area, in California in general, and Los Angeles specifically, the overall trend is just always up. But there's ups and downs along the way. So at that point in time, we were what we called spec builders. So we were paying millions of dollars for the dirt, millions of dollars on the construction, And those projects, as I said, are so complicated that from the time you start to the time you can bring it to market is 2 years. Well, a lot can go wrong in 2 years. So being cognizant of this and being in that part of the business for a while, I just started to get a little bit more nervous about it because we've been in an upward market for a while. So we decided to keep doing what we were doing, but to really scale it back to something that would be faster, less expensive, less risk. So we found a probate property in Culver City that we bought for $735,000. And our plan was just to knock the house down and then build the biggest 2-story modern box on it, but something with a more reasonable exit price of maybe in the $2 million range. And as I said, we could do it faster, less risk. So we bought it, we hired the architect, and then fate stepped in. And we all have these moments in time where something really profound in your life happens, and you not only remember the thing, but you remember everything about the moment that this happened to you. And this is where my story begins that brings me here with you today. And I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was driving in a car with my business partner, and we were going out to look at some more property in Ventura. And all of a sudden, he started telling me about this brand new ADU law that had just gone into effect. And there was something about that message that hit me so much that I remember everything about that moment. I was sitting in the passenger seat. I remember the hill outside the door. I remember the sound of his voice. And I was so intrigued with this that I immediately deep dived into it. And the more I studied it and the more I researched it, the more I just came to believe that this was going to be a very important part of the future of real estate in our area. So I was able to convince my partner to completely change plans. So instead of knocking the house down, we just beautifully remodeled it. And then in the backyard, we built the very first 2-story with rooftop deck luxury ADU in the city of Los Angeles. And you're looking at that on the screen right now. And it worked because we bought it for $735,000 and we sold that property for $1,805,000, which was great. But during that process, it just like everything about my life changed. And by the time we finished it, and I was the real estate agent that sold it, I completely went out of the spec building business and went full-time into the ADU construction services business and spreading the word about ADUs. And that's what I continue to do today. And during that process, we really answered one of the most important questions that everybody should be asking is, how much value does an ADU add? In the end, this will take a while for it to completely be enough of them for this to actually get totally verified, but it's already there. Whatever your property is worth per square foot, that's what an ADU should add in value to your property per square foot. So it's all obviously neighborhood sensitive, but this is where the gold in ADU gold came in. Because anywhere in the Los Angeles area, now I use a lot of references to Los Angeles because that's where we are, where we have the most experience. Anywhere in Los Angeles now, the median price per square foot is about $700 a square foot. That's what your ADU is going to add in value. So if the numbers are kind of simple when you break it down like that, $700 a square foot, build a 1,000 square foot ADU, what's that? $700,000 of value. And of course, the rents go right along with that. And I know this is true because we verified this on our very first product. The person that bought this property, not surprisingly, moved into the ADU. The house is beautiful, but the ADU is just even cooler. And he rents the front house out for $4,500 a month. That is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. A couple years later, he moved off the property. He rents the ADU for $5,500 a month. The ADU is 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Yeah, this is interesting. This is just one of those LA things. It's a Culver City address, but technically it's in the city of Los Angeles, not Culver City, which was important because when we built this, we couldn't have built that in Culver City. They were in the beginning, they were not too sure about this whole ADU thing, so they weren't very supportive. Very fortunately, LA has been very supportive of all these new laws. And since then, things just have gotten better and better and better. First law was 2018. In 2020, they added to that the multifamily properties, which is now what we mostly do. And I know most of you people are multifamily owners. So they added multifamily properties to this mix. And the cool thing about that is you can add even more ADUs than under single family. So it's just, and it seems like every year they're passing more and more aggressive laws to allow more and more and more. We'll be talking about those new laws here tonight with Taylor. So the opportunity is there. It just continues to grow. And this is stuff that I really am tuned in now to the multifamily mentality, which has been my great honor. And I've learned so much from Jeff and working with AOA. And it's interesting because most multifamily owners follow the most important investment rule of all. And it's the simplest one: buy, don't sell. And if you can have the discipline to do that, you always end up with the most money in doing that. So, of course, you keep acquiring properties. But what I've learned is that in Los Angeles in particular, buying a new multifamily property to add to your portfolio, it's hard to justify that because the spread on that is so tight now that people are very reluctant to buy more property. Well, we got the answer for you. You can grow your portfolio and you don't have to go out and buy anything new. Just redevelop your own existing properties, because there's almost for sure a way for you to add at least one ADU and probably many more. And of course, that same thing, that instantly increases your equity value and instantly increases your cash flow on the property, because with the stroke of a pen, the government has given you the opportunity to build an income-producing asset on free land. Well, how can it be free? Well, it's free because you already own it. The cost of the land has already been spoken for. So when you're computing your ROI, it couldn't be more simple. It's the cost of construction versus the equity it'll create. It's the cost of construction versus the rent it'll create. And as I said, those two things always go hand in hand. So it will always be a home run. You can screw that ADU up every way possible. It will still be a home run. So this is an opportunity to expand your portfolio, generate more cash flow, generate more equity, and it's just a magical moment. And because the government created it, I learned this a long time ago. What the government giveth, the government can taketh away. So this is one of these, get it while the getting's good, because we have no idea what will happen next. But so far, the trend has just been more better stuff, and we're going to talk about that now. So I'm going to introduce right now and have Taylor come up. I've been working with Taylor now for 5 years. He's also from Minnesota, and he's just an amazing guy. Since I've known him, he's become a full-on licensed contractor now, and he already had his law degree, and it's just so fun to work with young, brilliant people. It's inspiring to me, and I've learned so much along the way from them. So, this is Taylor Francis.
Woo! Everyone, thank you, Seth. Seth said, my name is Taylor. I've worked with Seth now about 5 years. And even though we're both from Minnesota, we met out here as a result of sort of a happy coincidence. Seth's ADU Gold Company originally had hired a lobbying firm that I was working with at the time to lobby some of these ADU rules, which the objective was to continue to increase the ability for you to add value to your properties. And I would, those lobbying activities on the whole across the state were successful, which is why we're here today to talk about some of the expanded opportunities that we now have. Here on the screen, I just wanted to point out these are a series of buildings here in LA. See if you can find the ADU in that picture. I think you'd be hard pressed to identify which one was the ADU that we built. This here is the ADU that we constructed, but you'll notice that these days ADUs are nothing different than most normal types of construction. It's traditional duplex development, but by a different name, and that's what the state has ultimately given to you as owners of multifamily properties. Next slide, Ella. So today we'll just talk briefly. I'll give a bit of an overview about myself and these upcoming laws. Those are SB 9, SB 684, and SB 1211, and the way that those specific laws apply in the city of Los Angeles. I'll talk a little bit about construction, some about construction financing and the difficulties and opportunities that go along with that. And then I'll give some examples of projects that we've done. So some background on me. When I graduated law school, I was doing permits almost full time as most of my work. I did some construction project management. And during that time, I was working for a couple very large investment funds as the main expediter for those companies. In that time period, I got approved more than 1,000 units in the city of Los Angeles. And I actually think the number of units that we approved through that time period was closer to 2,500 total new units in the city of LA. My main area of focus has been multifamily and ground-up development of ADUs. And I will say that I was very fortunate working with those investment companies to be able to challenge some of the boundaries of what's possible, because they always wanted more and more and more, and we kept looking for opportunities to deliver more and more and more, and there was no expense spared. So it allowed us to learn about different types of ADUs that pushed the boundaries, that were the tallest they could be, that were the biggest they could be, but also that were the greatest returns that they could be, because sometimes those things are not always the same. Next slide off. So this is, we'll distribute this afterwards because of the tech. We had some difficulty with the resolution here, but this is the LA City Interoffice Memo for ADUs. These rules are now multiple years old, but the city has moved relatively slowly, even though they're incredibly in support of the ADU rules. It's taken time for those rules to develop, and we've been there every step of the way developing those rules. One of the biggest challenges that goes along with construction of ADUs is most people think of ADUs as being a small little garage conversion that they do in their backyard. While that is a value-added project and you will get money from that, when you look at the construction price, so these are my actual construction prices based on square footage. And I actually, those dots on that diagram are prices that I charged owners for construction projects we completed for that. And you'll notice if you're down, in the 400, 500 square foot range, some of those prices, granted, some of these are very high-end homes, so that drives the price up. But the total for construction that I pay tends towards $300 a square foot, which is, somewhat inconceivable to pay. To me, I can't even fathom charging an owner that quantity of money. As you get to larger square footages, the price decreases substantially for construction on a whole, whether you're working with me or whether you're working with other contractors. And I'm telling you, my actual prices that I charge people in this slide. So some of the mindset around what constitutes an ADU is something that needs to change, because when you're adding value to your property, you're getting the value. Most any property in LA sells for minimum $400 or $500 a square foot, sometimes up to 1,000 square foot or more in certain very luxury areas. So in general, the goal is to get the highest quantity of square footage. And as you have smaller square footages, you may get some additional value from those projects, but you end up spending a lot more money. You can create that margin, the difference between whatever your contractor or I are charging you and the total price per square foot that a property in that area sells or rents for. So in general, depending on the area, more square footage tends to be better, which is why I tend to sell people on or encourage people to really consider who they're working with, because working with somebody who knows the very most that you can get, even if you don't end up doing the very most that you're able to do, at least you can make a strategic decision about where you're expending that value. And that's something that Seth or I, as we talk about a potential project, would walk you through completely. Did you have a...
Yeah, and I think that this thing about cost is such an important feature, because smaller in some aspects is better, but the actual price per square foot goes much higher. So even if you want to build small, it would be better to build two small ones than one. You're still going to get that price break in the process. Now, of course, the two most expensive rooms in any housing is the kitchen and the bathroom. So even when you have small, you still have that. When you get bigger, maybe you're going to get another bathroom as you go, but you're not adding another kitchen in the same facility.
Well, and the other thing I'll say is that I counted up, I had a slide that I have in the full presentation, which I'll put online, but in that presentation, I listed every single document required and every single touch point with the city that you have in a typical ADU project. There are more than 75 different touch points with either the city or different vendors that you need to have in a typical ADU project. And while there are some reduction in the number of those things for smaller projects, like a small garage conversion, the vast majority of those requirements still exist, whether you're doing a 400 square foot unit or a 10,000 square foot unit. And ultimately, what you're paying for is the time of me and the other professionals that work on these sorts of properties. And those are expensive things to generate, expensive reports to generate. Even when I have some of the most cost-effective people that are generating the surveys and the engineering reports and all of those types of documents that we need, it's still, there's a minimum barrier to entry for almost all of us.
And I think one of the last points, which you probably can't read, is that SB 9 has been in law for over 2 years. And we still get people telling us, my architect told me you can't do that.
Thursday, I had a call. An investor of mine, I sent him over a property of hey, we should do this project. It's a great property in a nice location. And they, everybody always checks up on me. I expect people to check up on you. This industry works by people working together, which is the great thing about the AOA. And you all know that in this room. Everybody has to work together to get the best outcomes. And it's a collaborative, cooperative environment more than people understand. And, he goes and talks to his architect, somebody else that he knows, and they say to him, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I send him a link to the city's own website that has that graphic right there that comes right off the City of LA website. And I say, no, you can do 4 units. You can even do 5. This graphic doesn't have the 5th possible unit documented on it. And this is a type of project we've done before. So don't tell me that we can't do it. So that's where it comes down to working with people that understand what these rules are to get the most value.
And this is the cool part is we're going to be talking about some of these new laws and their applications. And I don't know why this is true. I'm actually really glad it's true, but you are going to learn some things about some of these new laws that nobody else knows. It's astounding to me, particularly this SB9. This is going on 3 years. And still very few people understand that in the city of Los Angeles, on a single family lot, you could put 5 legal living units on that.
With not being an owner occupant, I want to
Right,
make that clear.
exactly.
You don't
And no
have
lot
to-
split.
Don't have to split the lot, but because there's so much information about lot split, you have to be owner occupant. You can't have 2 properties next to each other that are owned by the same ownership entity. There's so much information, misinformation about the scope of SB9. I'll go to the previous one. This is an ADU that we did. Well, the previous slide was an ADU we did. That was a very traditional ADU, which is the single most common type of ADUs that owners ask me about, which is an ADU over a garage. And the total for this project was around $300,000 for a 1,200 square foot ADU, when you considered everything all in with the driveway and all of the components that went along with it. This is now rented for more than $3,000 a month. I think it's $3,300 or $3,500 something a month that this was rented for. So it ended up being a really great value add. Going forward, there may be even more opportunities on properties like this one, but I just wanted to highlight that one of the biggest challenges with the parking area is when you build parking, the price per square foot of the parking you build is roughly the same cost of structure that you build elsewhere. And I'm telling you this because I sign the checks for the people that build the things. I mean, I sign the contract, the subcontracts, I see everything. I do metrics on what are the price per square foot, and the price per square foot of something over parking, you pay per square foot for the parking that you build. And that's just a reality because the parking requires more structural engineering to make it work because you have these large open spans that need to be supported. It still has electric, it still has drywall, it has a full slab that needs to be reinforced to support a car. Often we put a hose bib inside there so it still has plumbing. The only real thing you don't have in a garage is the HVAC, which is a pretty marginal cost. So I just do want to point out that parking is a challenge. And a normal parking space is about 16 feet by 10 feet. That's a bedroom. So where you could get $100 to $200 for a car parking spot, when you rent it to some tenant, one additional bedroom, which is almost always possible on projects like this because it's about the size of a parking spot. Most any neighborhood in LA that'll rent for at least $700, $800 more. So the name of the game is bedrooms, but unfortunately it's also a lot of taking parking away. The city does allow you to take parking away, and the law allows you to take parking away. I will caution you, however, there are equal housing, fair housing laws that apply. And so you cannot take someone's parking from existing tenants that are oftentimes, lower income and have been there for a very long time and give it to the new tenants. You cannot make that to be your plan. If you're going to take someone's parking away, just take everybody's parking away so that you don't end up in a equal housing lawsuit, which is something that has happened to people I'm aware of. Thank God, not one of my clients. But okay, next slide. Okay, so why trust the ADU experts when it comes to SB9? Well, now I like to think I'm probably one of the experts on SB9 in the city. I imagine I've done as many, if not, I'm one of the people who's done probably more than most people. But in an SB9 play, 3 out of the 5 units are ADUs. And they're the exact same ADU laws that we worked with for multiple years, now just applied to a single family property. So it's how these laws interact that really generates the most value for you in SB 9 and all these other laws we'll talk about.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we ask you guys some questions, or should we leave it Q&A?
Well, we'll do more at the
and
end,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I want to also add a really kind of obvious point, and that is, which I talked about at the beginning a little bit. You get asked a lot about, well, where is the best place to build an ADU? Actually, that's a really simple question to answer, because the cost of construction is a fixed amount. Doesn't matter where you build it. You'll spend a little bit more in a nicer area and finishes perhaps, but your basic cost is the same. So the best place to build an ADU is in the most expensive neighborhood, because that is going to give you the highest value in terms of equity you created, and also the highest rent. Those two things always go right together. So one of the things that we've moved into now is assisting investors, owners, in finding the best projects to create this new housing on. And we're really good. As I said, I've been a licensed broker agent for 38 years, and I know the perfect kinds of properties that will give you the most return. And here's an example, which is an interesting one. The best properties to build an ADU on are corner properties, or properties on an alley, or the trifecta, a corner and an alley. Why? Because they have more access points. More access points means that you can create more privacy between the units. More privacy between the units creates more value, so it increases the value, and this is where you get the double dip. In the single family world, properties that are on the corner, guess what? They sell for less because they're on the corner, because your typical homeowner doesn't want traffic on two sides of their house. So they sell for less. But for this new use, it actually is a plus in the value. So you get the double dip on that formula. So if you're thinking about looking for new projects and new opportunities, we're a really good source for that, because this is just one of the many factors that go into figuring out the best places to put this. And what Taylor actually figured out, even before I did, was that like one of the areas that we're really high on right now is Highland Park. Highland Park is one of those areas that's rapidly gentrifying. It's moving up really fast, and the rents and the square footage values have skyrocketed, but we can still buy the dirt there at a very reasonable price. And this comes down to a really simple principle. With a stroke of the pen, the government allows you to build way more stuff on the same land.
5 times as much stuff. I mean, this was the single biggest zone change in the probably
Right.
history of the world. That you can now build 5 times the number of units that you once could build on a property. Both that's in SB 9. When we talk about AU rules in general, those at the time were the biggest changes that the state, or probably any municipality, ever had done. Because I think the only other place that had done something similar was our state of Minnesota, and they allowed for 4 times.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's been really, but it's so interesting is that, the value of land is primarily dictated by what you can put on that land. And with the stroke of a pen, once again, you could put 5 times as much, both from an equity and a rent perspective, on the same dirt. So what did that do to the value of the dirt? It made it more valuable. But that hasn't baked into the system yet. Nothing's changed. Single family homes are just single family homes. Doesn't matter what you might do with it, you're still buying it at the same cost, which is all just this cascade of things that have happened to create this opportunity. And this opportunity is really based on first just knowing what the opportunities are. And you're hearing stuff tonight that very, very few people understand to be able to articulate it. And that's why I just get excited about talking about this story every day.
So anyway, used to be that there were a lot of very complicated formulas when it came to building units on multifamily properties. The existing state law allows for 2 detached ADUs and up to 25% of the number of units on a property in existing non-living space. So you could essentially get 2 detached ADUs, and then if you're in the city of Los Angeles, you could also get 25% of the existing number of units on the property, but again, has to be within existing non-living spaces. We have done some projects where we've built new non-living space and then converted that new non-living space into units. So functionally, it's 2 detached ADUs plus 25% of whatever you have on your property. There are other cities in the greater Los Angeles area and across the state of California where the vast majority of them will say you either get 2 detached ADUs or you get 25%. Now, with the passing of SB 12, now I should say, the law that allows us to do that allows us to add 2 new units or that allows us to add 25% of the existing number of units on a property was only 2 sentences long. So there's not a lot to go off of with that. I mean, when I first started going into cities, especially smaller cities, saying to them, we're going to build 2 ADUs here, they said, no way, no way. And I would go to the state housing department and I'd say, send an email to the city, and the state HCD, which has really supported ADUs and additional construction units, would send an email, and the city would relent under that kind of pressure. Now, under SB 1211, which is the new law, you're allowed to build the number of units that you have existing on the property. So it's a pretty simple formula. Take the number of units you have existing on the property, and that's how much you can build. Most properties, there is a natural limit based on the number of units that you could fit on that property. And there are some very complicated intricacies there that come into play. As you build more than 2 units in a similar structure, in the same structure, the costs go up 20+%. So as you're building in what's called a commercial type of building, you have greater requirements when it comes to fire sprinklers, solar panels. Everything gets more intense as you build an increased number of units. So that's something that's important to double check with the contractor that they've done work in commercial projects before.
Oh, let's tell them about the newest one.
Okay, next one.
This is like, every time they kind of up the ante, I'm just dumbfounded that they actually did this. Well, this one, SB 686, this actually passed a while back, but this is part of the process, is that when the state passes a law, even when they make it a mandatory law, the cities still have to draft their version of that complies with the state law, but then they add in whatever they can in that based on the state law. And that process can either be done quickly, if they want it to be, or it can take a very, very long time, like forever, if they're against it. So this one took a little while to percolate, but this new one now is going to allow, this only applies to multifamily properties, as Taylor was kind of alluding to, is that you can add up to 8 ADUs based on a 1-to-1 count from what you already have there. So if you've got a 2-unit right now, you can add 2. You got 3, you can add 3. All the way up to 8. You can add 8 more units. Plus, in the city of LA, for each one of those units, you can also add an ADU and a junior ADU. So let's just do a little math here. You start with an 8-unit building. You get to add 8 more under that rule. That is now plus 2 under the 25% rule. So that is now going to be 18. But this newest one is now just going even further because each of those units can be subdivided and sold as a condo. And each one of those units can have the junior ADU and the ADU. So the numbers just keep growing and growing and growing. So you can easily end up now with 30 units on a single family, on a multi-family lot. That maybe right now is zoned for much, much less than that. So it's really just an explosion of opportunity.
And these, just to clarify, this SB 684 is a state law that allows cities to rezone multifamily properties at their discretion. The city of Los Angeles has essentially said that they are going to upzone all of the city's properties. It allows for up to 10 units. So essentially that's what the new 684 law is saying. And as that interacts with ADU laws, including the new ADU laws, it's going to create massive numbers of unit potential on most properties. I think that the single biggest limiting factor is the size of the lot and the existing unit counts you have. So there's a very strategic decision that goes into what can we build, how can we build it. I mean, it used to be that the logic was build the most number of units that you possibly can. Now that the city has upped the number of units that you can build in almost every case, there's a strategic decision related to the size of those units, the best mix for the property, because what you can see here is a project I'm currently working on. This is 6 units. That 6-unit property occupies really every single available square inch of that property. And it's 6 3-bedroom units. There's some parking, so there's, if we were to get rid of the parking, we could probably easily get to 7 or 8 units. But getting to some of these very high unit counts that Seth was talking about would require a very different type of project, like a large multifamily building with an elevator. So there's sort of a interplay between those to determine which type of project makes the most financial sense. Smaller unit counts with more bedrooms, or larger unit count with mostly studios and 1-bedroom apartments.
Well, why don't we bring up the guys?
Oh, yeah, sure.
We got a couple more people we're gonna bring up. We're gonna bring up Robbie. Come on up. He's from Turbo. Also from Minnesota. And John, you wanna come up? Because, always with these great ideas of building all this stuff, one of the most important questions is, that's a great idea. How do I pay for it? Well, unless you just happen to have all that cash sitting around, you're probably going to be looking at some financing.
Not from Minnesota, Iowa.
No, he's not from Minnesota. So John, let's start with you. What has changed in the financing world in the last few years in regards to these ADU opportunities?
Well, can you guys, do I need a mic? Okay. Well, first off, my name is John Sherman with Arbor Financial, KMC Financial. I've been a mortgage lender now for 27 years. So I specialize in ground to firm construction, fix and flip, fix and hold, renovation loans, you name it, I do it, other than reverse mortgages, and lo and behold, ADUs. So what we've seen change in the last few years, a lot of folks have come to us first about, hey, I have an owner-occupied property and I want to build the ADU. That's where it really started, right? So it was going to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and explaining to them these new laws and getting that passed with those major government investors, Fannie, Freddie, Jennie Mae. Didn't want to have anything to do with it at first. But obviously times have changed, and I get multiple phone calls today about ADUs. ADU is a very buzzword right now in my industry. So folks that are owner occupying a property and do want to build an ADU, yes, you can under Fannie Mae. Freddie Mac actually now allows that you can owner occupy and you can build 2 units, right? But this is more for the investment folks. So we've changed in drastic ways when it comes to ADUs. And also, probably one of the biggest challenges we had at the very beginning was value, right? It was challenging because you have an appraiser out there who's appraising a single family residence with an ADU and doesn't even understand what an ADU is. And we're trying to compare those two units. But what we've seen change in the past 2 years is there are multiple properties out there now that have multiple ADUs, so the values are very easy to get now, right? It's not as challenging. So for me, when I'm talking to investors like yourself, it's not so much about the owner-occupied property. Maybe it is. And if you guys want to discuss that, I'm open to talking about that after. It's more about how can I take advantage of the land that I have here, John? How many units can I build? Well, that's going to go into, we call it commercial, but it's not really commercial, right? It's investment. An investment, like Taylor had explained, it just depends on how many actual units you can build. How do you get the financing for that? Well, if you own land, I can finance the land. We can finance the land used to the construction to help you to build those ADUs. If you have an existing property and you want to use that property as equity to build another ADU, there's many ways to do it. You can do a renovation loan, meaning that we actually do something to the construction of the primary home, which allows us to give you the funds to build those additional ADUs. Or you can do the old-fashioned way, right? The equity lines. I get calls every day about home equity lines. And a lot of folks like myself, I'm self-employed, right? So my tax returns don't always, they don't necessarily show my gross income at the end of the day. And an equity line is probably one of the most difficult things to qualify for. They have very strict guidelines, set debt to income ratios that you cannot exceed. So typically, if someone comes to me for, say, a home equity line, we have new ways to pull that equity out. We do it on a bank statement product, or we do it on a P&L product where we're using a one-year P&L to help pull that equity out. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, guys. Renovation loans, construction to perm, pull the equity from the land if you own the land. We can finance up to, in some cases, 75 to 80% of the aftermarket value on the properties if you're doing construction. And we can use that equity from the home. I have one right now that we're doing a construction to perm. He's pulling 20% equity from the land to build the property, and that's his 20% down payment. And then we're financing up to 75% of the aftermarket value, the ARV value. So, is that enough information? Am I just spitting? I'm sorry. I get very excited about this because it's really changing out there, right? So we're seeing more and more advantages of being able to do this. And the construction lenders that I work with have really started to open up their financing, their guidelines. I have probably 10 or 15 that I work with on a daily basis. We have construction lending now up to $50 million. You know, and that's pretty unheard of. Now, if you got a $50 million project, please come see me when we talk about that. Thank you.
And then Robbie, I guess let's have you say a couple words. I should have mentioned I have done a lot of permits, and I have since stopped doing that quantity of permits. I used to do permits for projects that I did not do construction on. As I've become a contractor, it's gotten to a point where doing those types of projects doesn't make as much sense for me anymore, and my focus needs to be on the projects that I'm building. So one of the people that I've worked with closely is Robbie, who's doing a lot of great permit work, and he's got a new company called Turbo Permit that has a very intuitive way to deal with permits, and it's very transparent, which is, to my mind, the thing you want when dealing with somebody who is doing the permit expediting for a project of yours, is that transparency to understand what's happening in the process. Because the old ways of doing permits where you walked into the office and you talked to somebody and had a great relationship with them, those ways are long gone. Everything these days is online. It's about getting permits like a system. That's how you are able to get permits in the best way possible, meeting the requirements of the people that set those requirements, and that's what Robbie's tool is really designed to do. So I'll let him speak on that.
Thanks for the kind words, Taylor. Enjoying working with you, and Seth, thank you for the invite today. My background really is in technology. I started my career at Accenture and Enterprise Systems, went to business school at Kellogg, and then made this transition to real estate technology, and I've been doing that the last 10 years. I moved to LA after being in SF with both Airbnb and other real estate technology businesses. And I helped Cloud Kitchens, which is a ghost kitchen business, start to work with cities as they started to expand and navigate the gray areas that we needed to convince city employees that we were by the book and following these similar kind of rules that these new ADU laws are presenting. And so as I started to think about kind of how I could make a business, kind of an impact on this housing crisis, I really saw all my worlds coming together. And so I started Turbo Permit, which is essentially a way to increase the speed at which we believe that we can get you guys through this process, exactly like what Taylor was saying, by understanding what the requirements are up front, what fees look like, and then kind of trusting the computers to help push this process along. So I have had the opportunity to navigate SB 9, a few projects there. And I think he might have had to take off, but working with another company here that was in attendance and would be happy. I think, are we going to move on to questions at this point, or that's a little bit about me?
Yeah.
So
Cool. All right, so you got some questions out there.
Yeah, a lot of questions. One of my questions is when we talk about, I own a lot of apartment buildings, and when I do the numbers of renting a unit with parking and without parking, it's substantially lower when it's rented without parking. Like I have like 3 bedrooms, like Koreatown. The ones with parking go for like $3,800. The ones without parking go for like $2,800 to $3,000. So if you're spending all that money on construction to build the ADUs and do everything, number one, you're losing parking from the current unit. Number two, you're not going to have parking for the next unit. So as I pencil in my numbers, I mean, I'm asking you guys because you're the professionals, you're doing real estate, you're doing it. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense unless it's like a single family street with a ton of parking outside where people just park their cars, go to the ADU. I don't know if financially it really makes sense to lose parking unless you're actually building the garages and the units on top, and the square footage just becomes so big that the cost of doing it is high.
Yeah, I totally get that, and it's an important analysis. And every time we're looking at a prospective project for a client, we do a feasibility study in front. And this issue is one of the things that we always have to consider: the unit mix and then the parking. How important is the parking? How much value does it represent or not represent? And that varies in every location. You brought up one of the things that's obvious is that if you have an abundance of available street parking, well, probably doesn't make that much difference. If your street is already completely choked with cars and there's literally not one spot available, maybe 80% of the time, then that changes the value of the parking. But it is also, besides that, there's a change in society that supports this non-parking thing. Taylor, once again, really showed me the reality of this is, and once again, I go back to Highland Park. This is mostly a younger, upward mobile occupant that's either an owner or a renter. And I go back to this story is that when I grew up, in my generation, which was a long time ago, when you turned 16, the day you turned 16 or 18, depending on the state you were in, you were at the DMV getting your driver's license. The day you were eligible. I mean, this was like one of the most important life-changing moments of your entire life. I get to drive a car. So that's where you were. That's not the way it is anymore. It's changed. People are getting used to not having cars. Young people in particular obviously start with no car, and they do their calculations real quick, and based on where they travel, they can just push the button on the phone and the car magically appears to take them wherever they want to go. And it costs less money than owning a car for their use. And very soon, right now in the city of Santa Monica, robo-taxis are roaming the streets. No drivers. What's that going to do to the cost? It's going to drive it down. So it's going to be even more affordable. So these are changing dynamics that go into it. And some properties, and it sounds like yours might be more in that camp, where it might be, you'll always make more money. But if it's not substantially enough to really motivate you to want to do it, maybe that isn't the right choice. So they're not always going to be the perfect solution, but most of the time they are. And you do always typically have the option of keeping some parking and building above it.
Yeah, I'm relatively anti-parking. I love my parking spot that I have, but I from an investment perspective, it's very hard to say that the parking works. We try to find creative ways to force parking on properties, whether it's kind of hanging off into an alley or in the side yard setbacks or something like that. There are some little tricks that we can do to squeeze 1 or 2 cars onto the property, where we're able to. That's where having an alley is super valuable. But, for a car to sleep takes the same amount of room as for a human to sleep. And a human is going to pay a lot more to sleep in that space than a car is going to pay. And so that's just the simple mathematics of where it may not make sense. Now, I've heard a lot of owners complain that it's very hard to rent units without parking. That I can concede. I think that there's not a functioning market in the city of Los Angeles for parking. That's what I will say, is right now, if you look at the price to put a car, to park a car, should be about the same price as to sleep a human, because it takes about the same amount of space. And that is not the way that the market currently works. The market currently works such that it's much more effective to have somebody sleeping there than a car. So I also think that there's a lot of opportunity in this area for multifamily owners. There are ways you can get rental cars parked at your property if you have 1 spot or 2 spots that tenants can use. There are ways that you can negotiate with, next door property owners, because tenants will never negotiate with the next door property owner for a parking spot. This is a lesson I've learned. But you, as the owner of that property, can call the restaurant next door and say, hey, I've noticed that you don't have a bunch of parking. Can I buy a parking space off of you for $200 a month, and my tenant's going to park there? I can guarantee a tenant's not going to do that, but you as the owner likely can do that, and I've seen that work in a number of situations where people live next to churches. I've had churches so excited to have someone call and say, yeah, we're going to give you $100, $200 a month for a tenant to park in the lot, and it's a great thing for them and potentially a tax relief.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about multifamily, you typically think of R3 zoning or greater. Does that include RD15 and RD2?
All of them.
All of them, anything with other than like a single family residence?
Yeah, so these rules were all written with the same wording in it, which is an
Repeat the
existing.
question. Yeah. Repeat the question. So.
Okay. Repeating the question. The question was.
Does it have to be R3
Does
zoning?
it have to be R3
RD15, RD2?
For any number of units, especially under 684.
Yeah.
Yes. Under 684, the discussion that it's related to an existing multifamily building on the lot, because some of these cities have gotten clever and tried to downzone multifamily properties to be single family so that you cannot build it. Yeah. But the laws all specifically state an existing multifamily building on the lot. So if you have a multifamily building on the lot,
Is that 2 units or more?
2 units or more connected If there are two disconnected units, that's one problem that still has not been solved. LA County allows you to build multiple units on that property, LA City does not.
So you get the same density on an RD15 as you would on an R3 and R4.
Nowadays, on our properties, RD15, R2, RD2, R3, C2, R4, but those are kind of a different breed. All of those properties, all those zones, we basically do the same project, which is a project that I showed up on the screen. 6 to 8 units, that's our very typical, copy paste the plans. Those properties all allow for the same rough density overall, very similar projects, cookie cutter, copy paste.
And as he said, that actually includes commercial zoning. Most commercial zoning allows residential use, and those also qualify for these opportunities.
As long as you're not in a specific plan, most commercial zones allow that. But most commercial is the equivalent of R4, which is really large densities. So in commercial, you can end up with very large buildings, 20, 30 units, which is again a different animal in terms of the size and scale of that project. Those C zones are, it's hard to know what exactly to do with them, whether you do a smaller, easier project or really max them out.
Yeah, height restrictions and things like that.
There's tons of height restrictions in C zones. So if you have one thing I think is hilarious is in the city of LA, there's a zone called XL, which you would think is extra large. It's actually extra limited. Extra limited.
Yeah, I'd like to know, are there rules for buildable area in consideration of the lot area has been changed? For example, when you're talking about 5 units ADU can have in single family dwelling, there should be a ratio. Are those ratio exist, or let's say there's the front yard or side yard or whatever, the distance between buildings, whatever. What happens to that?
So I'll repeat the question. The question was, what objective zoning standards apply to especially the SB9 properties, including floor area ratio, building separation requirements, etc. So at the risk of getting too technical here, you are allowed to build in most R1 zones the same square footage for the 3 units in the front, the duplex, the new duplex you're building, and the conversion unit converted out of existing non-living spaces. Those 3 units have to fall under the zoning floor area ratio for that zone. So in most zones in the city that are R1, that's 45%. In some zones, it may be 55%, depending on the R1 zone that you find yourself in. The 2 detached ADUs that you're allowed to build in the back are theoretically exempt in terms of square footage. This has been the single biggest argument that I've had with the city. I've fought it on every single project I've gotten involved in. I've won it on every project I'm involved in, and they keep coming back to me and saying, no, you're capped at 800 square feet. And I said, no, I talked to your boss's boss's boss, and he said, I'm not capped.
If you can fit it, you can build it.
Yeah. So,
For example, my building is less than 5,000 square, the lot is less than 5,000. It's 4,500, something like that. So years ago when I checked, they said that you have, use the maximum allowed of buildable. Now, if I want to convert the garage to make it ADU, I like to increase a little bit.
You will, you can.
Yeah,
I can. That's
all those laws have changed. I can't speak to any specific property.
Where do I get all the laws that because the building code contains now the building code regarding all this?
Well, I'll give you my phone number or something afterward, because honestly, there's There's a couple of people you can call, Seth can help too, but there's just, if you try to talk to the city on any of these things, good luck. They will just tell you no because it's the easiest thing to do.
Let's get this question up there.
Thank you.
Thank
What about prefabricated modular ADUs? What are your thoughts and financing on those?
Oh, we'll do both. The prefab, it's a question that we always get, and it's really interesting because I personally am, my happiest day will be when I've got a prefab product that I can offer out to our customers. There are prefab products out there right now. They all advertise the exact same thing. They build it faster, better, cheaper. Lie, lie, lie. It's not going to stay that way. Eventually, they will get this down. I mean, it only makes sense. I mean, they used to build cars on the dirt too. They stopped doing that 120 years ago, and they started mass manufacturing them because then you do all those things. You will get better value. You'll do it faster. It'll be more accurate. All that stuff will be true, but it's not true yet. Right now, any prefab product that's out there, Taylor can build it better and for less money. And until that changes, this is what we're going to be offering. I mean, you can get prefab if you want to pay more. You can get it right now, but we found, not surprisingly, that our customers all want the same thing. They want the best product at the best price, same as I would want. And right now, it's stick built. But they will have that technology. They're getting close to it, but for right now, you're basically going to pay more for the same product, so I just wouldn't recommend it. Now, in terms of financing,
So financing a manufactured ADU. So as long as it's not a single wide that you picked up from the park and you're dropping it next to your house, you're gonna be okay. That's probably the best answer. So yes, we can accept manufactured. It just has to meet the requirements, right? So to us, it doesn't really matter. It's part of either a construction or a renovation loan, whatever it may be. That's gonna be part of your plans, talking to your contractor. If they're doing a manufactured or they're dropping it onto the slab or whatever it may be, it just falls into how we're going to finance the loan. So hopefully that answers your question. Manufactured is not an issue.
And can I get your card?
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you my information.
oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
The other thing I'll say on manufactured is it's rare to imagine that there's going to be a perfect box that's just going to fit in your backyard. That's going to be the exact best thing you can build. You know, so they're mass manufacturing for the most properties they can hit, but that means it's going to be smaller than what you could build. It's going to be less ideal for your specific property than it could be. Whoever was, I can't see all the way up there. It's pretty bright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the parking spots for tenants. Let's say if I got 4 units, 6 units. How is it easy or not easy to remove the tenants from that parking space, especially on under rent control units?
Give it to the attorney.
Parking is a non-essential service, and I'll say that is the case. Parking is a non-essential service. If you take a non-essential service away from a tenant, the tenant has to make a complaint to the city housing department that you took away a non-essential service, and as a result of the non-essential service reduction, they can go to a case management meeting where they will get a determination for the total amount of rent reduction. Most rent reductions in the city of LA range from somewhere from $20 to $50, and the housing department is in general in support of removing people's parking because they're getting additional housing units built. It's a non-essential service, so you are allowed to take that away. I think the most cases what I see is best is you negotiate with the tenant. You know,
Yeah, you always want to do that first, but and we've spoken with several of the also the attorneys that do a lot of work with AOA Dennis Block, being one of them. and I'm not an attorney, but this is just what they told me. Parking is considered an amenity, and unless there's something specific in your rental contract contrary to this, which there virtually never is, you have the right to withdraw an amenity. And as Taylor said, that your worst case scenario is that you're going to have to end up compensating them for some loss in that amenity that they had when they signed the lease and no longer have. But and this is even news to me, the housing authority, which ultimately would be setting that price, they're doing that very, very conservative amount of money. So it's, from a financial perspective, it's almost always going to be a winner.
I had a client go through unfortunately, the process is pretty painful. Not exceptionally painful, but it can be painful if you have a really sticky tenant. This tenant fought tooth and nail and received a $13 a month reduction in service.
Oh,
I don't even want to think what my client spent to try to get that number, to respond to the complaint.
Wow.
But again, yeah, $13 in like 6 months of wasted time, but it is it is possible.
Yeah, I have a question. I live in West Los Angeles. I have a house, older house. I have a garage, which is I'm trying to do ADU with. I've been told after I will finish the project, my house will be reassessed and property taxes will be higher.
Mhm.
And and plus my house, since it's older one, will be under rent control if I decide to rent it. But ADU, since it's a new one, it's not going to be under the rent control. I wanted to clarify this. Not even rent control or not, but the taxes, because I bought a house like almost 20 years ago. Now it's, let's say, double price or maybe even more than that. So if it will be assessed, I'm paying taxes as of today from the time when I bought it. So what's going to happen with the taxes? Yeah.
And so the question is if you build an ADU, what are the property tax ramifications of that, basically? And fortunately, at this point in time, we still have Prop 13, which kind of controls our property taxes. And this has really been such a amazing gift, which I think most people don't even realize, is that in many parts of the country, and California before Prop 13, each local city assessed your property. And that could be whatever the hell they wanted it to be. When they needed more tax money, they just reassessed your property to a higher number. So that's what created that fight back from the people that live here. So under Prop 13, it's very simple. The purchase price of your house establishes your rental rate. The cool thing is that's it. There's just slight increases that they can do to that, which automatically happens pretty much every year, but that's it. And you can even transfer that to another property. Before it was very restricted to where you can transfer it. Now you can transfer it to virtually anywhere in the state of California. So it's not going to change the value of your house. Now, of course, you're adding more house to your house. Even if you were just going to do the same square footage, expanding your house, that would change the taxation value of it because it's not the same house anymore. But it's a very relatively simple formula. They base the increase on a hard number, the cost of the construction, not somebody making up a number of how much value it actually increased. This goes back to where I started from. You're going to pay maybe $300 a foot on the high side to build it, and it's going to create on the median price side of $600 a foot in value. But that's not the way the tax assessor is going to look at it. They're going to base your new value based on your construction amount. One other little interesting point of that is, where do they get that construction amount from? you. Now, they're not stupid. You can't say you built an ADU and it cost you $10,000. But nonetheless, the property value taxation wise will go up. But it's once again, because of our system in Prop 13, it's going to be relatively minimal versus the value that you're creating. Yeah.
So I'm visiting from Florida, but I am interested in investing out here. And just my quick question is force appreciation utilized with ADUs here for tax purposes? Not that we gotta tax down, but my biggest thing is force appreciation. You're fixing it, you're putting your expenses into a home to increase value. Is that utilized here in California as well?
Forced depreciation for what?
For expenses on the ADU, because you're building a new home and adding value. Is that utilized for force appreciation?
Well, are you talking, I mean, federal tax code is gonna be the same regardless of whether you're here or Florida. So if you're talking about the federal taxes, that is true. If you're talking about state taxes, California state taxes are a whole different animal.
Okay.
So I can't really, yeah, but that would, I assume, be a much smaller tax burden than the federal tax burden that you have. The federal tax code is consistent state to state. So.
Regarding two-story multifamily buildings in Santa Monica, is it better to do an ADU before retrofitting or quick retrofitting or after?
You're at the same time.
Same time as that.
Because
I've heard both sides.
yes. Now, there's some people who are gonna tell you otherwise because retrofitting is easy and they just wanna charge you more money. But if you do the retrofit the right way, you don't have to do the extreme, the moment frame that you need to do in most retrofits, because you can substitute the whole front wall that you're building on this ADU. That provides most of your shear value for the retrofit. So I'm now building a 2x4 stick wall for the whole front of the building rather than a steel beam. I just installed some steel beams on that project I showed there, which was, I have some more pictures of those cantilevers. $85,000 for those beams. And most steel beams are 40-some thousand. So you can save that. It's a good marginal savings. Yeah. You've been waiting.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, what is the height restriction? You wanted to build a 2 units with parking underneath and a rooftop deck. Could you do that with a staircase on the outside, spiral staircase on the outside, like you do in a single family?
Not on a typical ADU.
You can't do it.
Most buildings, possibly, if it's a normal type of construction, possibly yes. But an ADU, we've raised the height limit from 16 to 18 to 20. So Seth and I have been part of the group lobbying that change, and it keeps going up, but unfortunately I think 20 is about where it's.
What is 20? Oh, that's great. Okay.
Well, it's 20 if you have an existing multi-story, multifamily building in a transit zone.
Got it.
That and you match the pitch of the roof of the building in front. So.
Okay. Yes.
So you self-report what the pitch in the front is. So you try to make the self-reported pitch in the front as low pitch as you can to get the most height that you can.
Okay. Is it possible to convert 1 unit to 2 units and label it as an ADU?
In select situations.
You still have to look at it.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it. Most likely, yes. But it's a bit, you're not allowed to convert existing living space, so we have to convert it to non-living space, and then that's.
Okay, I got a couple of YouTube questions. Do you guys work in, just rapid fire here, do you work in Escondido, San Diego County?
Yeah, this is Jeff. We're online, and he got some people that have questions, and he wanted to know if we work at Escondido. No.
Number two,
But we could probably find you a good referral for that area.
can you expand the garage before building on top of the garage?
Well, there's, depending on your city, they all have very specific things of what a garage can be, how big it can be, how it affects the overall square footage, the floor area ratio, and all those things. So it's a maybe, but it's all dictated by the local zoning requirements for that.
Okay, here's number three. Can you get separate utilities, gas, electric, and water? And yeah, just explain how the utilities work.
All the utilities by code have to be separate.
There you go.
Here in LA, there's no more gas, really. All new buildings in the city of LA are all electric. I don't know how in the world they're gonna manage that. There's not enough energy without the gas supply, but that's the current code.
Even water?
Water, they will not allow you to have a second meter on an R1 property, but you are technically obligated by state law to provide a private sub-meter, which you can set up. There's relatively low enforcement.
Thanks, guys.
But electric always. Whoever the two hands. It's
Go ahead.
kind of hard to see.
Okay, I have one more question. It's regarding sprinklers. I have a rental property, it's actually 2-story, it was a 3-story building, and it was a huge attic. And the city made me to tear off the attic. It was 4 units on the top of the attic. And they said because it was built before, even before I bought the property, it was built without permit, I cannot have. I was working on it, and I've been told that even if I want to do it, I need to bring sprinkler system to the whole building. At this point, I have two stories, which is has 4 units on each story, which does not sprinkler system. Is this true? If I want to go back and build, bring back units on the attic area, do I need to have sprinklers on the third floor? Or I was reading that if, let's say, my existing 2 floors does not have a sprinklers, I don't need to have a sprinklers on the third floor.
Unfortunately, the city will extract their pound of flesh. They will probably insist on
On the sprinklers.
Sprinklers are actually remarkably affordable, but I think from a rental perspective, they do more harm than good. They tend to cause more property damage than they prevent property damage.
Yeah, but I need to bring sprinklers on the all
Most likely,
floors.
yes.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're gotta wrap it up, but I'd like to thank everybody and my guests for coming in. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jeff. Thank you, and I hope we all get a chance to get there again. And we have our contact information up on the screen here. We have business cards, so we'll hang around for a little bit and more than happy to answer any questions you have and spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you.